Evolution spent 200 million years making him taller. Longer neck, stronger legs, massive body. All so he could reach what others couldn't. And then, in just 50 years, evolution killed him with the same strategy. Because when the trees disappeared, his neck reached nothing but empty air. Let me take you back 150 million years to the late Jurassic period, when giants walked the earth and the sky was a different shade of blue. This was the age of sauropods, the largest land animals to ever exist, creatures so massive that the ground shook with every step, so tall that they browsed treetops that no other herbivore could reach. And among these giants, there was one who stood above them all. We'll call him Titan. Titan was a Brachiosaurus, 85 feet long from nose to tail, 40 feet tall at the shoulder. His neck alone measured 30 feet, longer than a school bus. His front legs were longer than his back legs, giving him a giraffe-like posture that elevated his head even higher. When Titan stood at full height and stretched his neck upward, he could browse leaves 45 feet above the ground. For perspective, that's higher than a 4-story building. No other creature could compete with him. No other herbivore could reach those heights. The tallest leaves, the freshest growth, the most nutritious foliage, it was all his. For 40 years, Titan had lived in paradise. The late Jurassic world was warm and humid, with seasonal rains that fed vast forests of conifers, ginkgos, and tree ferns. Food was abundant. Water was plentiful. Life was good. Titan shared his territory with other sauropods, Diplodocus, Camarasaurus, Apatosaurus, but they browsed at different heights. The ecosystem was perfectly stratified. Ground-level browsers ate low vegetation. Mid-level browsers took the middle canopy. And Titan owned the sky. He had a routine. Every morning, he would move to the eastern edge of his territory, where the tallest conifers grew. He would position himself carefully, balance his massive weight, extend his neck to its full length, and browse the uppermost branches where new growth was most tender. 400 pounds of food per day. That's what his massive body required, and he got it effortlessly from a resource no other animal could access. But paradise doesn't last forever. The change started small, so small that Titan didn't notice it at first. The rains that usually came every few weeks began to arrive less frequently. The intervals grew longer. 2 weeks between rains became 3, then 4, then 6. The rivers began to shrink. The lush undergrowth started to brown. The smaller plants died first, the ferns and cycads that carpeted the forest floor. But Titan didn't care. Those weren't his food anyway. He browsed the canopy, the tall trees, and trees had deep roots. Trees could survive a little drought, or so he thought. The drought continued. Weeks became months. Months became years. The climate was shifting. Ocean currents were changing. Atmospheric patterns were reorganizing. Scientists who would study this period millions of years later would identify it as a significant climate transition, a shift from the humid Middle Jurassic to the more variable Late Jurassic. But Titan didn't understand climate science. He just knew the rains weren't coming like they used to. In the first year, the shorter trees died, the ones with shallow root systems, the opportunistic species that had thrived in wet conditions. They withered, turned brown, and toppled. Titan watched it happen but wasn't concerned. There were still plenty of tall trees, his trees, the ancient conifers with roots that went deep into the earth, tapping water reserves far below the surface. In the second year, the middle canopy thinned. Many of the mid-sized trees lost their leaves, entering dormancy to conserve water. Some died outright. The other herbivores began to struggle. Diplodocus and Camarasaurus, who browsed at mid-heights, found their food sources dwindling. They had to range farther, search harder, compete more aggressively for what remained. But Titan Titan was still fine. The tallest trees, his trees, were still alive, still producing foliage. Less than before, yes, but enough. He just had to eat a bit more selectively, move between groves more frequently. By the third year, something changed. Titan noticed it one morning as he approached his favorite grove of ancient conifers. Trees he had browsed from for decades, trees that had stood for centuries. Their needles were brown, not all of them. Not yet, but enough that he could see it from a distance. The vibrant green canopy he had known his entire life was fading to a sickly yellow-brown. He approached cautiously, extended his neck, and took a mouthful of needles. They were dry, brittle, tasteless. He chewed mechanically, swallowed, and immediately felt his stomach protest. This wasn't food. This was barely edible fiber. He tried another tree. Same result. And another. By the end of that day, Titan had consumed maybe 200 pounds of food, half his normal intake, and most of it was poor quality. Dry, dying vegetation that his digestive system struggled to process. He was still eating, still surviving, but for the first time in his life, he was hungry. The fourth year was worse. The tall trees, those magnificent ancient conifers that had stood for hundreds of years, began to die. Not all at once, not in a dramatic collapse, but slowly, methodically, from the top down. Their uppermost branches died first, the very branches that Titan had always browsed, the tallest growth, the freshest leaves. Dead. Titan would extend his neck to its full 45-foot height, open his mouth, and close his jaws around. Nothing. Dead branches, brown needles that crumbled to dust. He had to browse lower. 35 feet. 30 feet. 25 feet. Heights that other sauropods could reach. Suddenly, Titan was competing. The resource that had been exclusively his for 4 decades was gone. Now he was fighting for the same food as everyone else. And he was losing. Because Titan's body wasn't designed for mid-level browsing. His long front legs and elevated shoulders meant that lowering his head was awkward, uncomfortable, and energetically expensive. Other sauropods, Diplodocus with their flexible necks, Camarasaurus with their more balanced proportions, could browse efficiently at these heights. Titan couldn't. Every time he lowered his head to browse at 20 feet instead of 40, it felt wrong. His neck ached, his back strained. His massive body, perfectly evolved for vertical browsing, was suddenly working against him. It was like asking a giraffe to eat grass like a zebra. Technically possible, but painfully inefficient. And there was another problem. At 45 feet high, Titan had been alone. No competition, no aggression. Just him and the trees. At 25 feet, there were rivals. Younger Brachiosaurus, aggressive Camarasaurus, desperate Diplodocus. They didn't want to share. Titan had his first serious confrontation in his 5th year of drought. A younger male Brachiosaurus, maybe 25 years old, challenged him over a particularly good grove of surviving trees. Under normal circumstances, Titan would have won easily. He was older, larger, more experienced. A few warning displays and the younger male would have backed down. But these weren't normal circumstances. Titan was weak, malnourished. His massive body, which required 400 pounds of food daily, had been subsisting on maybe 250 pounds of poor quality vegetation for 2 years. He had lost weight. His ribs were beginning to show. His movements were slower. His strength diminished. The younger male sensed it. The confrontation was brief. Some posturing, some neck swinging. And then the younger male charged. Titan tried to hold his ground, tried to use his size advantage. But when the younger male slammed into him, Titan stumbled. He didn't fall, but he stumbled. And that was enough. The younger male claimed the grove. Titan retreated. For the first time in 40 years, Titan had lost. The drought continued. By year 6, the forest was unrecognizable. What had once been a lush, multi-canopy ecosystem was now a sparse woodland. Most trees below 30 feet were dead. Even the tallest conifers were struggling, their canopies thinned, their growth stunted. And the herbivores were dying. Titan saw it every day. Carcasses in various states of decay. Diplodocus, who had starved. Camarasaurus, who had died fighting over the last scraps of food. Juvenile sauropods, who simply couldn't compete. The predators were thriving. Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus had never had it so easy. The herbivores were weak, desperate, and dying. Easy prey. Titan avoided the predators through sheer size. Even malnourished, he was too large for most predators to tackle alone. But he saw them watching him, waiting, calculating. They knew, just like the younger Brachiosaurus knew, just like every animal in the forest knew. Titan was dying. Not today. Not this week. But soon. Because there was simply nothing left to eat. In year 7, Titan made a decision. He left his territory. For 4 decades, he had lived in the same 100-square-mile area. It was home. Familiar. Safe. But there was no food left here. If he was going to survive, he needed to find somewhere else. Somewhere the drought hadn't hit as hard. Somewhere with tall trees still growing. Somewhere that might not exist. But he had to try. The journey was brutal. Titan's body, designed for browsing, not traveling, struggled with the constant movement. His legs, which had carried 60 tons for 40 years, were wearing out. His joints ached. His feet, already cracked and infected from the dry ground, split further with every step. He walked for weeks, through dead forests, across dried riverbeds, over cracked earth that had once been wetlands, and everywhere he looked, the same thing. Dead trees, brown vegetation, skeletal remains of other herbivores who had tried the same journey and failed. He found a few pockets of surviving forest, small groves, where some combination of underground water and favorable terrain had kept a few trees alive. But other herbivores had found them too. These precious resources were guarded aggressively. Titan tried to claim them, but he was too weak now to fight. Other sauropods, younger, stronger, more desperate, drove him away. He kept moving. By the time he reached what would one day be called Colorado, Titan had traveled over 200 miles. His weight had dropped from 60 tons to maybe 40. Every rib was visible. His skin hung loose in places where muscle had wasted away. But he found something. A valley. Sheltered. With a small river still flowing, fed by mountain snowmelt. And trees. Not many. Not the towering giants of his youth. But living trees nonetheless. Titan drank deeply from the river. The first clean water he had tasted in months. And then he browsed. The trees here were young. Short. Their canopies topped out at maybe 20 feet. Titan lowered his head. That long, magnificent neck that evolution had spent millions of years perfecting for height, and awkwardly, painfully, browsed at ground level like a common herbivore. The leaves were mediocre, tough, not very nutritious. But they were food, and for a few weeks, Titan survived. He wasn't thriving. He was barely maintaining his weight. But he was alive. And then the other herbivores arrived. Word spreads fast in times of famine. Whether through scent, sound, or simple observation, other herbivores discovered the valley. Camarasaurus came first, then Diplodocus, then more Brachiosaurus. Within a month, there were dozens of sauropods in the valley, all competing for the same limited resources. The trees couldn't sustain them all. Within 2 months, the valley was stripped bare. Every leaf, every branch low enough to reach. Gone. And the taller branches? The ones Titan could have reached easily in his prime? They were there, 25, 30 feet up, still green, still growing. But Titan couldn't reach them anymore, not because his neck wasn't long enough. It was. 45 feet of perfectly evolved browsing apparatus, but because he didn't have the strength to lift it. Malnutrition had wasted his muscles. The powerful neck muscles that had once held his head high for hours were too weak now to maintain that position. He could extend his neck, but not upward, only horizontally. And even that for only short periods before exhaustion forced him to lower it again. The tallest creature on Earth could no longer reach the tall food. Evolution's cruel irony was complete. Titan spent his last days at the edge of the valley, near the river. He drank often. Water was the only thing that didn't require strength to obtain. He tried to browse the low vegetation, but there was almost nothing left. Other herbivores had stripped it all. On his last morning, Titan walked slowly to the river. His movements were stiff, labored. Every step hurt. He lowered his head to drink, and this time, he didn't raise it again. He simply stood there, head down, legs trembling, massive body swaying slightly. And then, gently, like a falling tree, he collapsed. His legs buckled first, his massive body tilted, and he went down. The ground shook with the impact, and then, stillness. Titan, 40 years old, 85 feet long, the tallest browser who had ever lived, died on his side in 3 inches of water. Not from a predator, not from disease, not from old age, from starvation, with food literally above his head that he was too weak to reach. Within hours, the scavengers came. Allosaurus, Ceratosaurus, smaller theropods. Within days, his body was picked clean. Within weeks, his bones were scattered. Within months, a flash flood buried them under sediment. And 150 million years later, paleontologists uncovered those bones and marveled at their size. They reconstructed his skeleton, measured his proportions, calculated his browsing height, and they concluded that Brachiosaurus was perfectly adapted for high browsing, a master of vertical feeding, the most successful high-level herbivore in Earth's history. They were right. But what they couldn't see from the bones was the climate shift that killed him, the drought that lasted 7 years, the forests that died from the top down. They couldn't see the tragic irony of a creature perfectly evolved for height dying because there was nothing tall left to eat. They couldn't see the evolutionary trap, because that's what Titan's story represents, not just individual tragedy, but a fundamental truth about evolution that we often forget. Evolution doesn't optimize for all scenarios. It optimizes for the scenario that's been consistent for millions of years. For 200 million years, sauropods got bigger and bigger, because bigger meant you could reach higher, and higher meant more food, and more food meant more offspring. Titan was the result of that selection pressure, the pinnacle of high browsing evolution. But evolution can't predict climate change, can't anticipate droughts that kill forests from the top down, can't prepare for the specific scenario where your greatest strength becomes your greatest weakness. And when that scenario arrives, you die. Not because you're weak, not because you're poorly designed, but because you're too specialized, too perfectly adapted for a world that no longer exists. Titan's neck was a masterpiece of evolution. 45 feet of bone, muscle, and nerve, working in perfect harmony to exploit a resource no other animal could reach. And in the end, it was a death sentence. Because when the tall trees died, Titan couldn't adapt, couldn't become a low browser, couldn't change his body plan in a single lifetime to match the changing world. He could only starve. Surrounded by food, he was too specialized to reach. Today, there are no more Brachiosaurus, no more giant sauropods. The age of the Titans ended millions of years ago, but their bones remain. in museums around the world, standing tall, necks extended upward in eternal browsing poses, and people look at them and marvel at how successful they were, how dominant, how perfectly adapted. And they were. For 140 million years, sauropods ruled the Earth. But success isn't forever. Dominance isn't guaranteed. Perfect adaptation to one world means vulnerability when that world changes. Titan's story is a reminder that evolution isn't about being the best. It's about being good enough for right now. And when right now changes, even the tallest can fall. Even the perfectly adapted can starve. Even evolution's masterpieces can become evolution's failures. All it takes is for the world to change faster than you can adapt. And sometimes, it does. The drought that killed Titan lasted maybe 50 years. A blink of an eye in geological time. Not even long enough to show up in the fossil record as a distinct event. But long enough to kill the Titans. Long enough to prove that being 45 feet tall is only an advantage if there's something 45 feet tall to eat. And when there isn't, well, then you're just a very tall creature, reaching for nothing but empty air, stretching that long, beautiful neck upward, finding nothing, and slowly, inevitably, starving. Because evolution gave you everything you needed to succeed, except the ability to change when the world did. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered.